I first saw the little camera on a weekday when the sky felt like a lid screwed down tight over the valley. January had pulled its gray hat low, and the demolition site that used to be Sleepy Pines Mall looked like a set of teeth concrete slab for gums, twisted rebar for roots. I walked across the frozen gravel with the usual coffee in a paper cup and a notebook in my back pocket. My name is Daniel Hart, and for 30 years I have stood next to other people's endings with a hard hat on and a clipboard in my hand. Got something you might want, the site manager told me as I ducked into the heated trailer that served as an office. Found it in a service corridor, wedged behind a mop sink. He put the camera in my gloved palm. It was a GoPro from back when everything came with right angles 2013 or Sabbath. The casing looked wrong. Not melted. Exactly. Warped. Like a child had tried to twist a Rubik's Cube that couldn't twist, and the plastic decided to flow instead of snap. The lens and the tiny window for the display were intact, but the body was pinched and thinned in places, as if a clutch of invisible fingers had kneaded it from all sides. Think there's anything on the card? He asked. Maybe, I said, feeling a prickle behind my ears. If the card survived. I don't collect much. Do many years spent hauling away other people's once precious things will cure you of that, but I do keep small objects with good stories. Old bus tokens. A lunch pail with a miner's name scratched into it. A brass key with no lock. This camera felt like it came with a story whether you asked for it or not. I took it home and put it on the only clean table in my house. The one in the room I still call an office, even though I don't write much anymore. I set my tools out and worked the casing apart slow and careful until the micro SD fell into my palm like a seed from a split husk. The card held 23 video files. I brewed coffee strong and sat alone in the dim room while the furnace hummed and night pressed against the windows. I told myself I'd skim a couple clips, satisfy the itch, and save the rest for later. I didn't sleep until the birds began their thin winter songs. What I saw began in the ordinary way of new toys. The first clip showed a small house and a yard crusted with old snow. A man mid-20s. Lean in the way young men are when they forget to eat played with the settings and panned to the front porch. The second clip shifted to a kitchen where a woman stirred a pot and rolled her eyes at the camera with warm exasperation. He teased. She smiled. They had that shine you can't fake. I won't use their real names. If they turn out to be living, they deserve the privacy. If they don't, well, the dead deserve their own kind of privacy, too. I'll call him Aaron and her Lila. He gave the camera weight with his ambition and nerves. She steadied it with her practical hands. By the fifth video, they were in a bustling, living mall somewhere else. Before Sleepy Pines and Aaron practiced his patter. He wanted a channel. He wanted a reason to stand in front of old fountains and closed storefronts and talk about where America went when the lights went out in places like these. It'll look great. Lila said off camera. Just breathe. And walk slower. The sixth and seventh clips brought them to Sleepy Pines. That long, single-level stretch of 1973 poured into beige tile and skylights the color of old milk. You could recognize the style in a second if you came of age any time before 2000. Wood veneer, dentist's office plants, a food court that promised more than it ever delivered, and no fewer than 2 anchor stores that always seemed too big to fill. They got there on the first day after closing. The doors were locked, but the maintenance entrance on the north end was cracked. At night, in winter, the mall was more air than building. A low-pressure zone filled with dust and echoes. They drifted down the service corridor whispering, their voices barely more than breath. Then the camera pushed through a door and held a picture that made my scalp tighten. A mural covered the back wall of the central court. I remembered the pioneer and forest thing everyone joked about without ever naming why. The people were drawn like paper cutouts. Faces too simple. Eyes too calm. But the pine trees behind them had stood in the paint like witnesses. Every needle, every shadow, like a forest painted by a hand that loved darkness without apology. The camera lingered, and Aaron laughed too loud. "Yeah," he said, "that's a little creepy." They came back in daylight. It was colder. Their breath fanned white. Aaron tried his history Torrigan dates. Architect. Stores that had come and gone, and Lila recorded steady and thoughtful, letting him be the star he wanted to be. Then she stopped and tilted the camera at a corridor where the light ran out a few steps in. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. The camera heard nothing but the cooling click of the building's bones. I turned my speakers up until the house lights hummed. Nothing. But when she wouldn't move, Aaron took her elbow, and the lens flinched. They argued later, their voices tired and low. Sleep deprivation will rub people the wrong way no matter how much they love each other. But they went anyway, because that's what couples do sometimes, not the wise thing. But the thing one of you can't stop thinking about after an hour in a motel room with the shades drawn. The 10th file showed them at the mouth of the security corridor with daylight at their backs. The GoPro sat in a shoulder rig. You could see part of the frame along the edge. A rectangle of cheap plastic. Aaron held his phone like a torch, thumb on the flashlight icon. Lila followed. And in that half-lit scrub of hallway they found a door marked Lost and Found. "It's locked," he said. "It isn't," she said, and turned the handle. The room beyond was small and bare except for a thing on the floor that took the light and didn't give it back. The camera didn't capture it clearly. The lens jittered. The sensor fought to decide what was figure and what was ground. Aaron crouched. Lila hissed his name with the kind of anger you use when fear comes out as love. "It looks carved," he said, "like a totem." "Don't touch it," she said. "I just want to." He did. There's always a moment when a wrong thing happens so quietly you could convince yourself it didn't happen at all. The picture trembled. 2 pink pixels bloomed in the upper third of the frame. Then a third. Then a fifth. The sound flattened. The flashlight died like a fish folding back into water. They ran. The camera fell against Lila's chest and showed a shattering of hull and tile and ankles. Then it found the open mall again. The safe space. The big, bright nothing under skylights. Except it wasn't that. Either. The next file didn't look like the same camera. The device had become, in its own image, something old-era Polaroid in a mirror. The name in cursive script on the front. Aaron was laughing at the wrong pitch. The way people laugh when they've been surprised by a magic trick that doesn't feel entirely like a trick. "Okay," he said, "you're not going to believe this." But they stepped out of a fitting room into a department store that should have been sealed in amber. Wash denim, shoulder pads, rows of polo shirts in colors that only existed for a few years when optimism had to be worn like armor against the end of something. "Deckers," Aaron said, scanning the signage. "This is where it was. God, look at that price tag." Lila never stopped moving her eyes. "You're seeing it," she said, "but you don't see it." "What?" "The people," she said. "I saw them. 24 of them. Bright as catalog models. Faces unfamiliar and perfectly forgettable. All in motion and not in motion. They didn't touch anything. They didn't speak. They drifted in patterns and settled into the shapes of time the way snow fills a ditch. Lila watched them like an animal who can tell the forest has gone silent. And a heavy shape is coming down the trail. They tried to leave. They found a door to the outside and Aaron tried to break the glass with a tripod he'd snatched from a filming setup near a red sports car. The tripod's metal head hit the glass with a snap that echoed like a shot. The glass didn't spider or haze. It didn't even think about being glass. It felt like watching a man punch water. They ate in the food court because hunger insists. He took a cautious sip of a sugary drink and laughed. Surprised. then ate a slice of pizza he said tasted fine, which somehow made it worse. That night they tried to sleep in the arcade, where the light from the demo screens fell over rows of still children like a sacrament. Aaron filmed because filming is what he did when he didn't know what else to do. "I'm not scared," he told the camera. And then, because he heard himself, "Okay, I'm scared." Something slammed metal somewhere out of sight. He slipped into a small electrical closet and held the darkness close until the file ended. The next morning the mall was a different kind of wrong, brighter and yet drained. The Muzak had bled into a single thin frequency, like someone stroking the rim of a big glass bowl. The skylights felt farther away. Lila crouched by the fountain in the center court, dipped her hands, and let the water run off her knuckles into the pool. She reached down, found a coin, and held it up to the lens. "State quarter," she said. 2005. Aaron frowned. "How would that be?" "It's not the past," she said. "It's a version of the past. Something put on like a coat. But the water kept some of the real world inside it. Maybe all water does. Maybe this is the only place in here where what's true can touch us." He wanted to argue because argument is what keeps our regular lives stitched to us when the wind picks up. But he swallowed it because he loved her and because he was tired and because deep down he believed her. The woman in cosmetics found them beside the sunglass kiosk. The camera caught a slice of gold perfume bottle and a mouth painted the color of a red apple that's been polished too long. "New for fall," she said. "Too close. Just a little on the wrist." "Sweetheart." "We're not interested," Lila said. "You will be," the woman said, her smile luminous and wrong. They ducked behind a rack of shirts. The rack moved. The woman was above them, not climbing so much as dripping down. She followed on all fours as they sprinted past the threshold of the store. She stopped there shuddering, smiling, unwilling or unable to cross an, until then, invisible line. "She can't leave the store?" Aaron panted. "She couldn't," Lila said, teeth together, "until we touched the water." The rule changed later. Rules always do. The woman found them again near the old Sears, just a dark cavern now, where tools and treadmills and winter coats had once hung in aisles that smelled like rubber and cardboard. This time the perfume bottle glinted in the edge of the frame as she crossed an empty tile seam without pause. "Run," Aaron said, and they did. Sleepy Pines began to come apart in ways only dreams and failing machines do. The letters on the movie screen listings melted and reformed into nonsense. The shoppers grew glossy and then slid along seams that weren't seams. Their mouths and eyes leaked black. A child's arm came off clean and rich as a candle wick, fell, and puddled into tar that shivered like it was still deciding whether it wanted to be a liquid or a shadow. Lila pressed her back to a column and tried to think. "If the water's real," she said, "then the water is how we leave." "How?" he asked. "We get it all over us. We make ourselves belong to the truth, not this copy." "That's not a plan," he said, voice frayed. "That's a prayer." "Then we pray," she said. Rain would have helped. A burst pipe. A sprinkler head unthreaded by trembling fingers. But the mall had been designed to be dry and to look like a place rain would want to be. They had a fountain. It would have to be enough. Before they could try, the mall moved into its third state. The blackness that had been trickling out at the seams between moments became a skin. It climbed the walls. It crusted the tile. It coated the benches and the fake ficus. It swallowed the water in the fountain not by filling it, but by becoming it. Until the pool was a color that didn't exist, and the light that traveled across it didn't come back the same. They felt a surge of relief when the black cooled and hardened. You know this sensation if you've ever seen a storm recede and watched the sky strip itself down to a clean blue. The world wasn't fixed. It was simply tired. "This is it," Aaron said, swiveling the lens. "It's going to peel away. The real place is coming back up like a boat surfacing." "No," Lila said, watching the wall by the old toy store. "Something is being born." The surface cracked and a hand, if you could call it that, pushed out. It had too many fingers and a sheen like wet vinyl. Another hand tore at the seam. And a third. A shape hauled itself from the wall's skin. Taller than any one person should be. With too many legs to be a man and too few to be a spider. It had mouths. And those mouths were in places no anatomy book would bless. It had a single eye. And the look in that eye, sorrow. Hunger. Recognition hit me in a place I had not known could be hit. New for fall. It said in a dozen voices. Each flavored with the memory of a different perfume counter. Aaron grabbed the tripod he had carried like a lucky charm. Ran toward it. And swung. The metal thudded into the creature with a shivering noise like a tuning fork punched by a hand that didn't know its own strength. Lila stabbed with a length of rack pipe and lost it. The thing didn't mind. Its skin took the hit like dough gives way to a thumb. The world narrowed to a plan that wasn't a plan. Lila whipped the pin from a fire extinguisher and sprayed. The foam ladled over the eye and the mouths. The creature shuddered. Aaron jammed the extinguisher's nozzle into one of the mouths where a tongue shouldn't have been and kept pushing until the handle lodged deep. Foam belched and kept belching. The line between the thing and the air around it bored itself into a smothered outline. "Now," Lila shouted, grasped Aaron's wrist, and ran. They climbed over the black lip of the fountain like people climbing into a boat that isn't there. They fell into cold and closed their eyes and held breath until the chest's automatic animal claw reflex would not be denied 1 second longer. The camera did not follow them. It slid from Aaron's shoulder, bounced once on the sloped rim, and landed at the creature's feet. The lens cocked at an angle, half sunk in the black crust. The picture bloomed with more dead pixels in a sky of digital pink and sickly green. The audio became an alarm that wasn't an alarm. A warning tone from a system you didn't know ran your life. The screen exploded into noise. Then it went out. I sat there in my office with the light outside turning from iron to gunmetal, the furnace clicking back to life, and my heart doing a careful percussive routine. I didn't go looking for the last file until I had stood up, walked to the kitchen, and stared at the empty sink like water might understand me if I looked earnest enough. The final file was small and wrong. Most of it contained nothing a human I wants to look at, bands of green and black like a busted TV trying to play a storm. 2 frames were intact. One showed Sleepy Pines in its half-life glory-some stores open. Some skeletal shoppers meandering with the vague purpose that money gives to a Saturday. The second frame returned to the thing on the floor of the lost and found room. Grainy and underlit. As if the camera wanted to remind whoever saw the clip where the hinge had been. I couldn't tell myself a ghost story because I already knew the most obvious one. I found a handful of posts and a few defunct links that said a man matching Aaron's age and hometown had taken a class in practical effects in college. I found a low viewership channel in the sand dune years of YouTube where a man and a woman walked the empty arteries of old retail and tried to turn a genre into a wage. It would be easy comforting. Evento draw a line and say, well, there it is. Magic tricks. Clever edits. Vanishing acts. Except, the camera's casing still felt like an object a hand could not make. Except, one of the demo crew dug up a galvanized bucket in the food court with bite marks in its rim. Too far apart for any human jaw. Except, when I went back to the mall one more time, February's light slanting low across the site. Snow like ash in the low spots, I stood in front of the mural that had stubbornly delayed demolition all year and saw a difference I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't watched 2 people run for their lives under it. Near the left edge, where the forest met the false pioneers. The brushwork changed. Up close, a real hand in real paint resolves into 1,000 tiny decisions. You can see the person who slept badly and came in anyway and mixed a better green and made a better branch. On that left third, the forest looked like it had been printed from a photograph of the original. The idea was there. The life was not. You want me to tell you how it ends? I promised myself I would. I called the number listed on the missing persons sheet from 2014. A woman answered. Older now. A voice with the weight of snow on it. She asked who I was. I told her what I had found and said I was sorry about everything even if I didn't understand everything. She listened like a person who had learned how to hear both good and bad news without letting her throat close. You found their camera? She asked. After all this time? I did. I said. Did it have? Did it show? Anything? It showed them. I said. It felt like a promise I could keep. She told me they were going on a trip that weekend. She told me the police had said a lot of things that never quite matched the kids she knew. She told me she still kept the porch light on sometimes because habits become faith when you don't call them by name. After we spoke, I called a different number, one I hadn't yet allowed myself to dial. People I know, the kind of people who can walk into rooms and ask for paperwork, owed me favors from jobs dusted with concrete and handshakes. We got access to the demolition site 2 days later. We went where the fountain had been and wore boots we could throw away. Under the place where water used to collect, I found a slab that didn't match the others. The tiles on top were mall issue, scuffed and cheap. The concrete beneath them had a cement outline of a square that had been poured separately and then smoothed to hide the operation. We cut it open. We found the extinguisher first, lodged like a harpoon in a hollow void, as if it had been swallowed and spat back into the wrong shape of throat. We found the stainless steel rod Lila had used when the world still had a normal number of limbs. We found no romance in this part-a-pile of clothing. Not intact, not folded, but there. The treads on a pair of women's high tops. Red once, still visible under the grime. A jacket that had belonged to a man who wanted to look good on camera. And under the thinner layer of debris, not prayed over, not wrapped in mystery to rings that had no business being under a mall floor. One was the plain band of a man who had not yet chosen his vows. The other was the thinner promise of a woman who had picked a stone small enough to wear to work. We logged the find and called the county. We put names where the county had kept lines blank because there was finally something to write. There's a kind of ending that isn't darkness or light. It's a stop sign. It's a hard period. It's the answer the world gives you because it is the only answer the world can give. The lab ran their tests. The mother I had called cried once on the phone and then again in the quiet place you make for someone else's grief. There was no trial to be had. There was no suspect you could bring into a courtroom and point to and say, "This is the shape that did this." There was only the mall's floor and the objects inside it, and the line between what is a story and what is a confession. We tore Sleepy Pines down after the thaw. The mural came last. I stood with a mask around my neck and watched the excavator's bucket lift panels into the air. The right 2/3 flaked and broke the way old paint does. The left third, that dead print of living brush, peeled away in a single sheet. For a second, it held the shape of a forest against the sky, a shadow of trees where there were no trees. And then it tore and fell and lay still. The distribution center that replaced the mall opened on time. Trucks thrummed in and out. The world's order flowed through the square where children had tossed coins and lovers had promised themselves something, and two brave people had done the only brave thing left to do when a place decides it isn't a place anymore. I took the camera apart one final time and buried the pieces behind my own garage. Not because I'm superstitious, but because instinct isn't always superstition no matter what we call it. I mailed the memory card to a woman who needed it more than I ever would. At night. Sometimes. The furnace hums, and the house settles, and the wind finds a seam and pushes. And I think about rules. Every system has them even when we don't know what they are. The mall had rules. The first one was that it belonged to the living. When it forgot that rule, it made new ones, rules no one consented to. Rules that ended in grief. The last rule, the only rule that mattered at the end, was that water remembers what buildings forget. When I drive past the distribution center, I don't look away. I look twice. And I think about how easy it is to believe in the past in a way that scours the present down to a gloss. I think of Aaron the way he wanted to be seen. The way he swung a tool he did not really know how to use. I think of Lila the way she heard the world even when the microphone didn't. I think of how love in a dangerous place becomes a map. They didn't vanish. They didn't leave the earth in a flash of light. They didn't become part of a story because a story was prettier than the truth. They fought. They tried. They left us enough to find them. And in the end, that is what endings are for. If you watch to the end, I'd like to hear from you. Violence and injustice don't always wear masks or march under banners. Sometimes they arrive as rules no one agreed to, or as places that stop caring who gets hurt so long as they keep existing. Tell me where you draw your lines. Tell me what you refuse to accept as just the way things are. Tell me what you believe we owe each other when systems, whether made of concrete or policy or habit, fail the people inside them. Say what you think. Take a stance. The comments are open.